One thing I want to talk about is dispelling the myth about image quality and how many megapixels do you really need. And is pixel peeping a proper way to evaluate image quality? How many people pixel peep now? Admit it. Admit it. You know what it is? Looking at a picture like this and then zooming in to see how sharp it is. And then you do things like this and say, well, that's not sharp at all. Look at that. You can't count the... Look at the hairs around the eye. They're blurry. Look at the chroma noise inside the eye. That looks awful. Now, this is a very easy conclusion to reach if you give your images unreasonable scrutiny, which happens to happen online all the time because it's so easy to do. In the real world, how much megapixels do you actually need? And how bad is bad when you're using pictures the way pictures ought to be used? Let me give you an example of high ISO, which, if you give it to people online, they're going to say, oh my God, that's absolutely, positively unacceptable. Now, these are, the examples I'm going to show you are the worst examples I was able to come up with using obsolete digital cameras that aren't even available anymore. This was taken with an 8 megapixel point and shoot. So the sensor was very small, the pixel density was very high. That's a formula for noise right there. And then you up the ISO, because this was taken handheld when there's almost no light at all. It was ISO like 800, which doesn't sound so bad today. But in this image, you look at it and you look at, you zoom in and you go, oh my God, that's completely unacceptable noise. This camera is for the garbage. Mm-hmm. What I'm going to do is take a lot of examples from old cameras at high ISO where people on online discussion forums would pixel peep and say, this camera has no image quality whatsoever, and I'm going to give it an acid test of reality. I've enlarged some of the worst pictures I could find. The right way to evaluate an image is to blow them up and view them at the proper distance that a picture ought to get. Pixel peeping, if I had a magnifying glass, I'd do this. It's not the way people look at pictures. It's not the way you should be looking at them on your computer. And what I want you to do right now is have everyone get up and have a look at these images, which are, don't get up yet. Let me just show you how bad one particular image looks when you pixel peep. I mean, I showed you an example already, but this one. This is, again, 8 megapixel camera, very bad light, high ISO, small sensor. You can't even buy a camera this bad anymore. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Oh my God! Look at all that noise. And on my screen, I see a lot of chroma noise too. Chroma noise is yellow, blue, green, things that shouldn't be having color at all. But they're there because that's what high ISO noise looks like. And if you zoom into any image enough, you're going to see it. Oops. So that's what pixel peeping is. That's the worst of it right there. Let's see how it looks when you blow it up and view it from a reasonable distance. Come here and look at my worst case examples and see just how bad a really bad picture looks.
So would you equate pixel peeping to using a micrometer to measure the...
There's a couple things I want you to see. One, even the worst camera produces pictures that you can enlarge and view from a reasonable distance, and it doesn't look as bad as it does when you pixel peep on your computer, because nobody gives it that kind of scrutiny. The picture of the cat, for example, it was daylight. It was a tiny sensor with a high pixel density. And yeah, a newer camera could have done a better job. And when you pixel peep, you can see the differences. But if you just had that, does that picture stand on its own? Who here would look at these pictures and say those are awful? So these pictures here are the worst that you can get. The worst. Let's go over to this side and look at what some of the best technology can do. Now again, the pictures on this side, the noisy ones, they weren't that bad. Some of these pictures here are taken with the best cameras you can get. The top one, the blue background, the man with the face, that was taken with an Alpha 7R, a 36 megapixel camera with a Zeiss prime and really, really good light. Cameras, details, prime lenses, none of those things mean anything unless all your other parameters are good. The light was good, it was close, the subject had detail. I was firing on all 8 cylinders for that shot. If my light was bad, a Zeiss lens would not have saved me. You have to have the good light first. The baby picture over here was taken with a Alpha 900 with a Minolta lens. You can see how sharp it is. Just look at the eyelashes in one of the eyes. Very, very detailed. The higher you go with megapixels, the more you can enlarge them to a great degree. This 36 megapixel one, for example, I can put that onto the side of the bus. But who can tell me, look at these 3, and tell me which one of these was taken with a 10 megapixel and one with a 36 megapixel. When you blow it up this much, you can't really see much of a difference. Who here has ever walked through a shopping mall and see a beautifully precise piece of jewelry on display, a photograph of a watch blown up to window size? I mean, just 8, 10 feet tall. If you're going to be shooting something like that, that's where you use a 36 megapixel camera. This one was actually 10. That's great. You can't even buy a 10 megapixel camera anymore. And yet look how good it looks compared to the 36. Is one that much better than the other? No, not really. And this is what you learn when you blow things up and look at them critically in the environment in which they're going to be used. You can pixel peep all day long. You can say, wow, how great the Zeiss is. But when you blow them up and look at them from a reasonable distance, suddenly everything changes. The bad ones aren't so bad, and the good ones really are good. But they're so good that you can't tell the difference between 36 megapixel and 10 megapixel when you blow it up. It's an amazing age that we live in. So now you know. And you kind of have to be here in order to see it, because if you're watching this on a DVD at home, you have to take my word for it and the word of the audience. These are different when you blow them up and look at them from a reasonable distance. There's a website I'm thinking of that does very detailed camera reviews. And they'll go through every single feature, and they'll show how it works, and they'll give their opinion about this, and then they'll do a very critical analysis. They'll take a standard studio shot of a standard studio scene, and they'll shoot it in RAW and in JPEG, and then they'll pixel peep like 1,000,000 times onto one tiny corner of a feather. You've all seen this, right? Today's cameras are so good that in order to see a difference in any of the competing cameras in the same class, you have to pixel peep 1,000,000 times. You have to go and give that unreasonable scrutiny just to be able to have a hope of seeing a difference. That's how good we are. You just asked me, is sensor size a factor in quality? The answer is yes, in theory it is. One of those pictures over there was taken with APS-C size. Can you tell me which one it is by looking at it? No. Because in theory it might make a difference, but in practicality, no. Even the APS-C cameras, even the Micro Four Thirds cameras are so good that unless you're shooting jewelry shots that are going to be enlarged to a display window in a store, anything will meet your needs, even cameras that aren't being made anymore.
Don't you get better depth of field with a larger sensor?
You get shallower depth of field with a larger sensor, and believe it or not, a lot of people don't like that. It's great for the artistic folks.
Shallow, right.
Shallow. It's great for the artistic folks that want really blurry background, but man, if you're on vacation, you want people in the front of the group and the back of the group to be in focus. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, there's only about a 1.5 difference, and you can correct for it by stopping down more. We'll talk about that tomorrow, about depth of field. But yes, in theory, there are differences, and I'm trying to put things into perspective about how important these differences are. And I'm telling you, by showing these as examples here and here, the differences are not as pronounced as you might have been led to believe. And this is the proof. How many minds have I changed today, just in terms of how many megapixels you have to have? Do you have to have a 36 megapixel camera to get really great enlargements?
No.
No. Now, for those of you who are watching this at home, I'm going to just read the last panel for you. He's zooming in on this little tiny period here in the pixel peepers. He sees something here, and he's zooming on the period. It says, need a life. Pixel peeping is not an appropriate way to evaluate the quality of your images. The best way to do it is blow them up and view them from a reasonable distance away on the image it was meant to be used. Have I hammered that in enough today? Does anybody believe me?
Yes.
Have a hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Excellent. Okay, let's do a quick review of what we learned today, because we covered a lot of ground. First of all, we talked about the difference between snapshots and photographs. Who can tell me what it is? Okay,
Snapshots are for grandma, photographs are for sale.
that's good. I like that.
Whether you're evoking a memory or it's something that everyone will want to see.
There you go, based on the rules of art. You are exactly right. We talked about learning to see light, as the camera does, is a key skill in getting wow-type pictures. Because you have to work with what good looks with the camera. Light and composition, we now know, compromise 90% of what a good image is. You know that now. It's intuitive now. I think you all believe it now. It's not your camera. It's not your Zeiss Prime or your Canon L series lens. It's light and composition. That's what will make people go, wow. We talked about the 8 winning compositional formula. I think formulae is the proper plural for formula. And we have those on the pink card that we gave out earlier today. We talked about where flash looks bad as a sole source of light in a dark room on top of the camera. We know that now. All point and shoots have that. There's no way around it from an engineering point of view. What's our savior? Wireless flash. That will save you. That will give you wow-type pictures even in dark rooms. We talked about the secrets for great travel shots. Establishing shots, environmental portraits. Who can tell me what an environmental portrait is?
Shows the environment of the subject.
Exactly right. In the environment in which they thrive. It tells the story about the person and their life in one image. National Geographic does this a lot. And where do you place your subject? Rule of thirds, very good. We talked about better family pics and the fact that touching between family members is the only way to communicate the relationship between people to a disinterested third party. If you do family pictures correctly and imaginatively, you're going to want to have disinterested people saying, wow, I want to be a part of that family. And we talked about why camera meters shoot for 18% gray and why they make mistakes on brides with white dresses and grooms with black tuxes. Because everything, the whole world, is gray. That's how it tries to make it look. And I proved this to you by making a black laptop look white and gray. Black turns out gray, white turns out gray. The whole world is gray. We now understand that. We now know where the camera makes mistakes, and we know how to correct for it by using
Exposure compensation.
exposure compensation, right. Make it darker, make it brighter. And because you have cameras that have live view, you don't have to know by how much. You just turn the dial until it looks like the way you want when you take the picture. It's so easy now. It's great. We talked about the common camera features, exposure compensation. We talked about red eye reduction and how you can get people to look like they're from Mars. We talked about the different scene modes and what they do, which ones were useful, which ones were not. We talked about white balance, and all that is putting a filter, a virtual filter, in front of your camera. A blanket of blue, a blanket of magenta, indiscriminate tint to your image. And it compensates for the fact that artificial light does not put out a full spectrum like the sun does. And if you use custom white balance, you can tell the camera, okay, you don't have to guess, this is white. Add whatever you need to add and take away whatever you need to take away to make that come out white. And the camera will blindly obey, and it'll work very well even in very unusual compact fluorescent bulbs. Today we talked about the things which I think people ought to be talking about. Light and composition, the world of art, how to get great shots without needing Photoshop. I think I gave you a great arsenal of tools to work with. These are things that people should know. Tomorrow we're going to talk about things that people want to know. F-stop, shutter speeds. We're going to talk about the religious debate of RAW versus JPEG. And I'm going to show you some surprising things about JPEG you probably had not considered before. We're going to talk about histograms. Once you understand histograms, you can now be a high priest online. You can go online and bully other people because, hey, you understand histograms. It's actually not that hard. And it's a very, very useful tool. We're going to talk about screen versus print resolution. And at the end of the day, I'm going to show you the only 8 things that I use in Photoshop to use my images. Because I grew up shooting slides, I try to do everything right with light and composition in the camera. I don't tweak the images much in Photoshop. I'll show you just the stuff that I do. Hopefully, if you've not used Photoshop before, it will be a nice, non-intimidating introduction to the subject. And so, having spent a wonderful day with you all here today, thank you for coming. I just want to leave you with 2 ideas. One, tell everybody about my books. Everybody. I Survived completely by word of mouth. I have no advertising budget. My customers have to be very, very happy with what I do. I have to make my books the best. And if you really like my work, you'll tell other people about it online, and that's how people find out about me. So if you like what I do, if you like the seminar, go online, tell people about it, spread the word. And that's it. Any questions? And we'll see you all tomorrow. Don't forget your homework.